This is your boy JG. This is the Punch Report. In this video, I cover the main card for the PBC event this evening. Stay tuned to the end. I will be offering a prediction for the main event, David Morrell Jr., David Benavidez. I see cats is hedging. They don't really know. That's confusing to me. We'll get into that. Isaac Pitbull Cruz, Angel Figueroa, and then Brandon Figueroa, Seth Coolboy Fulton. Let's just get into the content. Like I said before, this will be 10 minutes or less. Stay to the end. I will put a little film study in here to show you the primary area of concern that I have for one, David Morrell Jr. Let's go with that first leadoff event. Isaac Pitbull Cruz, Angel Figueroa. Interesting fight. I think this is a good fight stylistically for Isaac Pitbull Cruz to try to get his footing back coming off of a loss. Disclaimer, I'm not a fan of him at 140. I think that, well, let me rephrase that. I'm relieved that they decided not to take the bout with Ryan Garcia at a catchweight of 144 because I think he would have got absolutely slaughtered. Ever since he's come up from 35, he hasn't really looked the same. He looks heavy. He looks slow. He looks predictable. This fight works out for him from a stylistic perspective because he's essentially fighting a slightly taller version of himself. Come forward fighter, a little crispier puncher, gas tank, blood and guts, come forward, punches and bunches, all action guy. You could get caught slipping and knocked out for either individual. And for my money right now, this is the toughest fight for me to call because you have physical advantages for the opposition and Figueroa, and then you have a similar style, Isaac Cruz and Angel. And so you just don't know which way that ball's in. The first person to leave their chin up, have poor hand exchange, you get caught slipping and then knocked out bad. It's going to be an exciting fight. I think it's a hell of a way to lead off this card. Very strategic placement because it's all action coming out of the preliminary bouts. So I'm going to be on the fence for this one. I'm not going to offer a prediction. It is a good bout. Isaac Cruz, if he wants to put himself back in the position where big fights or people are calling for big fights, and he's not one of the guys that's essentially a gatekeeper, he's got to figure out a way to get this one done. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the comment section. How do you see this fight playing out? Moving on to the co-main event, Steph Fulton, Brandon Figueroa rematch back from 2021. I'm just going to come out and say it. I just think that Steph Fulton hasn't been himself despite winning his last bout after being stopped bad by Inoue. Shout out to Inoue. This is not 2021. It's 2025 at this point, February. Brandon Figueroa, you know what he brings to the table. A shit ton of volume, a shit ton of grit, and you got to figure out a way to sort that out. So I think the uphill battle for a cool boy Fulton is, can you be slick enough? Can you land clean enough, eye-catching shots to outperform the volume that you're going to have to put up with? He's not a big puncher. He has 8 knockouts. That's never been his thing. But it's tough to look so polished against a guy who provides so much volume in Brandon Figueroa. And so for me, I got to lean towards Figueroa. If Fulton wins, he's going to have to pitch a Floyd Mayweather type shutout. Shut him down, make him look confused, just really quiet his offense down. If he cannot slow him down and he has to, have to survive the pressure for the duration of the bout, I don't think that that's a winning strategy for Steph Fulton. I got to lean towards Brandon Figueroa for that. Last but not least, and as promised, if you made it this far, you definitely a real one. The main event, David Benavidez, David Morrell Jr., taking place at 174, 175. They both weighed in yesterday at, I believe, 174.2 pounds. David Morrell Jr. looked sharp on the scale. He always does. So it's like, for me, he just looked normal. And Benavidez, sometimes, he fluctuates, but I digress for just a moment. One of the things that's interesting about this bout is I don't hear a lot of people who are covering the bout speak about it from the perspective of, this is a step-up fight for David Morrell Jr. He is stepping up in competition. Unless you really follow his career closely, a lot of guys don't know who he's fought. Transversely, if you think about David Benavidez, he has some names on his resume, some legendary performances, some highlight reels. He's been in there with top guys, and he's done his thing. I also want to say this both for Morrell and for David Benavidez. I don't like these guys outside of 168. We saw David Benavidez, I think it was against Bostick, went up, fought. He did some things. He was throwing punches from way far outside, overcommitting on shots, getting heavy on his front foot. I haven't seen him do a lot of that at 68. I don't like him at 75. I don't like Morrell Jr. at 75. We'll get into that a little bit later. This fight is not for a belt. There were some complaints about that, but this is what you want to see. young up-and-comer David Morell, David Morell, stepping up to challenge David Benavidez. And he talked a little crazy. He said he was going to do to David Benavidez, what Crawford did to his brother, Jose. All right. And the other thing, too, and you could say this for both fighters. I hear a lot of, someone, Morell's going to just knock Benavidez out. He couldn't knock out a guy whose name I can't pronounce. Kalajic. He just fought him, and that went 12. And he damn near lost probably the last 3 or 4 rounds if you go back and check that fight out. But let me get into my breakdown. The area of concern that I have for David Morrell Jr., and I'll lightly touch on an area that I have concern for David Benavidez. David Morrell Jr., if you go back to his last bout, this was on the undercard of the Bud Crawford-Madrimov fight. He fought a guy, I don't know where he's from. I can barely pronounce his last name. But he started off strong, heavy shots, landing the left over top. His jab looked like shit that entire fight. He just cycled it a lot. It didn't come off the shoulder and go to the target. It cycled down. You kind of want to avoid that in high-level boxing. But anyway, if you get to the back half of that fight, and here the clips are here, you can see David Morrell Jr. being fed right hands on repeat. He's just eating these clean and flesh, whether it's a lead right hand or he's getting countered. A bulk of these are countered right hands. And for me, the inability to make that adjustment or get confused by a jab or a simple 1-2, if you get stuck on the outside against David Benavidez, you're getting cooked. It is what it is. And so for me, they're both up in weight. I don't think you're going to see a one-punch knockout in this situation. But if David Morrell Jr. can't figure out a way to avoid just running into the 2 or the right hand, then it's going to be problematic. Additionally, in this bout, and I don't know if it was a stylistic deal, he stood very flat-footed for the bulk of that fight. His primary form of defense was the high guard, it's just going to be ineffective against a guy like a David Benavidez, who's a vicious body puncher, who loves doubling up the left hand, going to the body, ripping you 1-2 times the body, then ripping you upstairs. The high guard is quite literally the worst defensive position you could take against a guy like David Benavidez. If you look at Caleb Plant, the reason why he had early successes, he had dynamic defensive styles. He had varying looks. He applied pressure offensively. He had great level changes throwing the jab to the body. He just presented different pictures of David Benavidez, and it was highly effective until it wasn't. The pressure got too much for Caleb Plant. He had to fight and survive. He's a dog, and he's a man for that. So, like I mentioned before, I'm going to offer you a prediction. Look at him eat the right hands. I'll put it in here one more time. And my prediction is this. Like I mentioned before, both guys up in weight. They're not at 68. I don't see like a one-punch knockout or someone just getting something crazy off. It's not outside the realm of possibility. I'm just saying I don't see it. Final prediction for this bout. I do see David Benavidez winning the bout, late stoppage or unanimous decision. It will be an action-packed fight. I think the pressure and the legitimacy of the size advantage, because you look at the guys, they might be the same height, relatively speaking, but David Benavidez is a bigger guy. I think that will show in the fight, the combination punching, and unless there's a legitimate change to the defensive approach for David Morrell, then I just think that it's going to be an uphill battle for him. For the individuals who hedged or maybe were hesitant to make a prediction, I think that's okay, because I think it's a good fight and it could go either way. I'm just going to not sit on the fence for this particular one. I think a lot of that comes from an emotional perspective. I think there's people out there who really, really rock with David Benavidez and think he could just he beat Jesus, anybody, just beat everybody, right? But I think there's equally a contingency of fans in boxing who want to see, especially Canelo fans, who want to see David Benavidez just take a loss. So you just start saying and doing crazy things. Like, it's like saying, Terrence Bud Crawford, he's going to go up and knock out Canelo at 68, but he couldn't stop Madrimov. Like, that doesn't make sense. But anyway, this is your boy JG. This has been the Punch Report. In the comment section, let me know what you guys are thinking. What are your thoughts on the fight and the main card? And shout out to y'all. Happy New Year 2025. We up.